Hello, my raspberry friends! Hello, everyone! Hello, hello, hello! Let me make sure the microphone's working. Check, 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 check. Okay, we're good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's stream. I hope you're all doing well. I'm doing pretty all right. My usual tired. Why am I always so tired? It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why I'm so sleepy all the time. But hello, everyone. I hope you're ready for and excited for today's reading. I don't know how much we're gonna cover this stream, but you know, aiming for our usual. That's all I can try. Hopefully the voice doesn't die too soon. Might need to take longer breaks if my voice doesn't recover within like a day. Drinking water. Water check or whatever it's called. Hydration check. Okay. So, I guess we'll just dive right into it. Please forgive me if I stutter, hesitate, and mispronounce anything, and for any noises in the background. Let's begin. We left off finding out who Tommy's friend was last chapter. We found out it was Purpled, and Purpled is the Witherer, and they're going to try to visit, maybe, if Purpled says yes. So, this chapter is called I Want to Live So I Can Hear Your Voice Again. This is chapter 13. Now, the trigger warnings for non-consensual drug use, descriptions of repetitive non-consensual drug use, descriptions of child abuse, kidnapping, accidental, child abandonment, throwing up / vomiting, mentions of past character death, and major character had flatlined but survived. Don't know what that last one means, but okay. Okay, we begin the chapter in what seems like a flashback. Puns wasn't sure what he was expecting when he was given Purpled. He liked Purpled enough that Dream didn't know his real name. Puns assumed it was too soon to start calling him Grayson and revealing that they were actually family. It would be way too much for him at that moment. Right now, all Puns cared about was that Purpled was safe and no longer trapped or enslaved. Though, that was what was concerning were the bags under his eyes, and how the once vibrant violet eyes were now a dull lavender that was almost gray. Kind of ironic. He adopted the name Purpled and his eyes became gray. He remembered what Purpled used to be like. A bright-eyed kid who would charge his way into anything and everything. The kid was a spitfire and caused trouble as much as he could. But all in all, he was a good kid. Puns couldn't help but remember the day they realized his powers had presented. It was so early. So frickin' early. It was scary because of how early it was. He was only 2 years old, but things just seemed to go right around him, and it was as clear something else was at play. The doctor's office had been cold and intimidating. Puns still had nightmares of it this day, although it probably wasn't about the creepy pictures on the walls. that were meant to be happy, but rather the news that came with it. Purple seemed to like it. He liked the waiting room, but had clung on to their mother until it was time to get tested. That part had been done alone. Although they were not expecting the doctor to come rushing out and demand more doctors to come in. Puns remembers their mother crying and their dad asking what was wrong and getting no answers. They remembered debating whether or not to shoot the doctor with their slingshot. They wouldn't miss, and it would certainly have gotten the doctor's attention. But they hadn't. Instead, they sat with their mother and father, hoping that Purple was okay. Code gold, the doctor breathed in the to the other ones. Don't you mean yellow? One asked. No, he had answered. Gold. With that, they all rushed into the room again, leaving the family shocked and concerned yet again. Puns wished he had shot the doctor then, but before long, the doctors had come out, looking happier than they had the entire time the family had been there. Congratulations, one of the doctors had told them. Your son is the first S-level to be born in 2 centuries. What? Father whispered. The doctor smiled and nodded. He is indeed. He has the ability to manipulate the probability of anything and everything. Basically, say you have a 1% chance of winning the lottery, he can make it so that it's a 100% chance. Though it seemed to require a lot of focus and there's little more to it than he knows, but literally anything is possible with him now. Puns didn't remember if his mother passed out or not. He does remember being just as shocked at the news. Purple, at age 2, was currently the most powerful and dangerous person in the world. Puns wasn't sure if it was still true today. The Witherer seemed just as powerful, if only because they had no idea who the Witherer was. Though he had the suspicion it was the other boy Purple was kept with. Gosh, his screams stayed with Puns even though the two were long gone now. The way the kid had screamed for Purple demanded that he wasn't to be taken away. Puns knew what it looked like from an outside perspective. There weren't a lot of reasons why someone like Puns would ask Dream for Purple. There were 2 options. 1, he wanted to use Purple for his powers, and 2, Puns didn't even want to begin to think of it. The mere mention of even thinking about it made Puns want to throw up and also hold Purple so that it would never cross his mind again. Sickening. Although after asking Dream for the boy as payment, he still shuddered at that. Dream had instantly made sure he wasn't like that. Good to know that despite everything, Dream still had boundaries. Although Puns doubted that it would do anything if Dream ever ended up in prison, child abusers, or any kind, were not treated well there. He wanted to save the other boy too, but he knew Dream would rather kill him than give up both of them. Unfortunately, that left him with a choice, the kid or his brother. It wasn't a hard choice, but as the kid was subsequently drugged after completely disintegrating the wall between them, Puns had never wanted to shoot Dream more. Although Dream had been smart and made Puns leave any and all weapons at home. Everything the kid had said made sense. Everything he yelled was for the protection of Purple, even though he had to have known it would have only ended in pain for himself. Puns wondered what happened to him. The Witherer hadn't been seen since. Puns figured hadn't been seen since. Puns figured he had been treated similar to how Purple had been. Gosh, he remembered when Dream first brought him down there. He had allied with Dream, despite knowing what he truly was, in hopes that Dream would be able to find Purple for him. He had never thought Dream would be the one to have him. Puns was very careful when he covered up his past. He made sure no one would track it to his family. Despite the fact that his parents had died, he still had Purple to look after. Even if Puns couldn't find him, it didn't mean others couldn't. He knew dang well what kind of enemies he would make when he started this job as a mercenary. He didn't need Purple being dragged into this as well. When they heard Purple had been taken, Puns didn't think they'd ever feel that guilty and upset ever again. Clearly what changed when they had seen the 2 kids in the basement of the compound. Not only had they recognized their brother, but the powers Dream had bragged about. Puns had almost thrown up when they were then and there after seeing how the kids reacted to seeing them there. They clung to each other, despite being a wall between them. Both of them were in chains and battered up, clearly abused beyond belief. Puns might have been a mercenary, and one of the worst things for a mercenary to have was morals, but Puns always drew the line at kids, and completely innocent people. There had to be a rhyme and reason to this job he did, if he was going to ever justify this, either to himself or his brother. But he seriously drew the line at kids. He was surprised to learn that most mercenaries, at least the ones he'd met, were the same way. No kids was almost a universal rule between them. Though that didn't seem to apply to Dream. No, He had no problem using and abusing both of the kids until they were both almost completely pliant to him. Purple had been there for 13 years when Punz found him. That was too long to be resistant to anyone. Too much for the brain to handle, not to mention the developing brain. And yet, Punz had never been more grateful for the favor Dream had owed him. As soon as Punz knew that Dream was going to owe him tremendously for it, they knew that they had to grab Purple. It had taken that huge favor, and all of the others, Punz had stood up, but Punz agreed to call them, even if Dream gave them Purple. When Dream asked why, Punz answered that he would be useful. Dream only shrugged, happy to get himself out of debt, not to mention the fact that Punz could have turned him in at any time he had denied it. But that was the past, or literally a week ago, but still the past. Punz had spent the last week getting his house ready for making sure that they themselves were ready to have their little brother back. Gosh, 13 years without him had been rough. Purple had been subdued, not even speaking since Punz had him and left, although he seemed to be studying the sky at times. When it was day, he stared at the blue, only crossing his eyes to blink or because of the sun. He paid the most attention to the sunset, only staring wide-eyed at the colors, and Punz wondered how long it had been since he had last saw the sunset. Although Purple had paid the most attention to the sunset, he was definitely more interested in the stars. He barely blinked, but didn't stare for too long. The car ride back had been awkward, and Punz hadn't wanted to push Purple and definitely didn't want to upset him, so he stayed quiet. The home was more like an apartment, but by itself. The 2 bedrooms, but mostly open floor layout. It was kind of cramped, but it was all Punz had. After all, it wasn't like he was there all that often. He showed Purple around and didn't say anything before he mumbled a small thank you after being shown to his room. Punz definitely picked up on the way his eyes widened as he was given an actual bed and his own room, and decided it was for the best for him to leave the kid alone. Punz locked the bathroom door behind him and splashed cold water in his face. This was going to be harder than they thought. Purple didn't seem too grateful to be out of there. Punz wondered when would be a good time to tell him who they were. Was there ever a good time to tell someone that? He sighed and looked at himself in the mirror. He wondered about getting a better apartment for the 2 of them. Sure, this one wasn't bad, but it definitely wasn't a place to raise a kid. Punz absent-mindedly wondered if Purple needed to go to school or if they were too far past that point now. As he walked out of the bathroom, he checked his phone for any messages. Denying and ignoring a job were 2 different things. Denying one was fair game. Ignoring a job could lead to a hit being placed on you, or worse, your family. Frick, Punz had family now. They had a weak point. This just got a lot of more complicated. If they had retired, the 2 wouldn't have any income. Punz didn't exactly have a wide range of skills that could help them in the business world. Getting a job that paid enough for 2 of them would be difficult. Not to mention, Purple probably needed special attention if Punz was going to help him. This was among the many thoughts floating around his head. Okay, so maybe he hadn't completely thought this through. To be fair, he thought he'd have more time before he was going to be able to take Purple out of there. When he managed to grab the film of Dream's face, sans mask and everything, he hadn't expected Dream to say he owed him his life. In retrospect, it made sense. If Dream got arrested, anything he had worked for would have been down the drain. Not to mention, it was improbable that they would find Purple and whoever the other kid was. Punz had taken his chance and grabbed Purple when he could. Although when Punz got into the living room, he almost dropped his phone. Punz blinked at what he was seeing. Purple had his hand on the doorknob. A paper clip was still stuck to the keyhole. He had clearly picked it, although it didn't quite look picked. It was strange, almost as if it had jammed a paper clip in the keyhole and it unlocked. He had used his powers. He changed the odds so the paper clip would unlock the door no matter what. Purple was frozen on the spot. He could have run. Maybe Punz could catch him, but they weren't sure. Instead, Purple sighed and aggressively tugged the paperclip out of the door and relocked it. Punz only blinked. Why hadn't he run? Purple only shaking slightly. It didn't seem like he was very afraid of anything, so why was he shaking? Just go ahead and do it already, Purple grumbled. It was basically the only thing Purple had said to him the whole time. Punz could only blink again before frowned. What exactly? Punz asked. Purple looked at the pocket of this hoodie before pointing to it half-heartedly. Punz's gaze flickered back and forth between Purple and his pocket before he finally settled on the pocket and grabbed whatever they had put in his pocket. How Purple knew and they didn't, they weren't sure, but as soon as they felt the little object, they remembered. They were the things Dream had pressed into Punz's hands before they could leave. They were confused before, but pulling them out, they realized the things were vials. The vials weren't labeled, but contained a clear liquid. There was a spot at the top where a needle would go to the medicine, so the medicine could be injected. They looked up to Purple only to find that he had since rolled up his sleeve. On his arm were so many injection marks. The crook of his elbow had been bruised up from the amount of times they had been injected with whatever the heck this was in these vials. Dream had continuously drugged his younger brother, like a lot. That was just one arm too. Who knew what was on the other one? No wonder he insisted on wearing his hoodie, even though they were in Florida for a while. Punz swallowed because he wasn't sure what else to do. The shaking was probably from withdrawals from whatever drug this thing was. Could you at least make sure to use a clear needle, like an unused one? Dream always made sure to make sure to unpackage the needle in front of me. It's in your best interest to use a clean one anyway. These things lower my immune system, and getting sick would be rough for the both of us. Purple muttered, scratching his forearm. Based on the red marks there, Punz thought it was safe to assume that he did that often. A nervous tick, probably. Punz felt physically ill, like actually. He swallowed again, hoping he wouldn't throw up in front of Purple. He just needed to get him into his room, and then Punz would be free to puke his guts out as much as he wanted. Go to your room, please. Punz managed to get out. Purple's head snapped up and he frowned, momentarily stopping from scratching. What? He asked. Please, Purple, just go to your room, We'll talk about this later, Punz said. Purple looked down again. He hesitated for a moment, and Punz prayed to any deity listening that he would just go before Punz broke. Purple shuffled quickly to his room. As soon as Punz heard the faint noise of the door closing behind Purple, they grabbed the kitchen garbage can and promptly vomited into it. They tried their best to be quiet, as they didn't want to disturb Purple any more than they already had. Even with their stomach was empty, they continued to dry heave until they could finally calm themselves down. They let their head rest against the wall as they sat next to the garbage can, not willing themselves to leave its side yet. They still felt sick. This was all his fault. All his fricking fault. When Purple had first manifested his powers and got registered as an S-level in over a century, as the first S-level in over a century, their family was obviously confused and unsure what to do. Unfortunately, their local containment unit saw this and decided to take advantage of it. The containment authorities had presented the containment center as almost a school, or more like a retirement home where Purple would be allowed to do whatever but have it be supervised. They also heavily implied that the family would have been able to visit at any time. Their mother had been all for it. After all, anyone with this much power was dangerous, and Purple was only 3. He had to have been placed where he could learn without hurting anyone. Their father, however, hadn't wanted to give Purple up, at least not at such a young age. Instead of fighting it out, they had given the last vote to Punz, who ended up siding with their mother. If he had just chosen to keep Purple at home, this wouldn't have happened. The containment center wouldn't have had Purple, and Dream wouldn't have kidnapped him. Gosh, this was all his fault. Purple had been drugged so much he was going into withdrawal. Punz had no clue how to handle that, nor did he know how to handle all of this trauma that was going to come with what happened to Purple. So they called it an old favor. Later that night, Punz knocked on Purple's door. Arrangements had been made and Punz needed to at least tell Purple something. They owed him that much. They got no answer, but they wouldn't just walk in. Purple, can I come in? There was no noise or response for a moment. Punz wondered if he had fallen asleep. Yeah? Purple said, clearly confused by him asking. Punz opened the door and nothing was really wrong there, which was good. Punz wasn't sure if he could handle something else happening. I need to ask you something, Punz told him. Okay, Purple replied, shifting to his bed. Can I sit? Punz asked, gesturing to the bed. Is that what you come here to ask? Purple snarked. Punz huffed a laugh. No, he replied, taking his answer as a yes as he sat down beside him. I'm not capable of handling what you need. What? I'm having a friend take care of you. He's equipped to help you in ways that I can't, Punz continued. I don't understand, Purple muttered. Is this a punishment? No, Punz rushed to explain. You need help and I can't give it to you, so I'm having someone else who can take care of you instead. Punz knew they weren't good at this. They weren't good at feelings or emotions or even telling people the right thing. They hoped they were doing the right thing now, though. They really were never sure. Okay, Purple replied. Can I sleep now? Aye, sure. Go to sleep. We'll leave in the morning. Punz got up and walked to the door. Good night. Night, Purple shrugged and pulled up the covers over him. Punz sighed and closed the door. They slid down the wall until they hit the floor. Oh gosh. To the present. We're going to have a guest. Are you okay to see them? Ponk asked. Purple only shrugged. Sure, he answered. You've been busy lately. Phone calls, now a visit. What's up? Ponk sighed and smiled fondly at him. I wish you weren't so perceptive, Ponk hummed. Something really important has seemed to come up. Purple only glanced at him and shifted in his seat. Oh, he replied, trying to be casual. Don't worry, stupid. Ponk stressed the vowels in the word, showing it was an affectionate nickname rather than an insult. I'll talk to you before any type of decision has been made. Are you going to leave? Purple asked. Ponk shook his head. No, if I go anywhere, you're coming with me. Don't worry, Ponk answered. Purple shrugged again. I wasn't worried, he muttered. Sure, Ponk huffed. I wasn't, Purple protested, but only half-heartedly. Punz wasn't allowed inside immediately. Ponk made him wait outside in the mudroom, but Punz managed to catch a glimpse of both of them through the window. Purple looked so much better than he did when Punz first took him in from Dream. However, what he wasn't expecting was the bandages that coated his forearms. He keeps scratching. It must be a really old habit. I haven't been able to break him from it. The only thing that gets him to stop is duct taping over oven mitts over his hands, which he hates. The bandages is so he can scratch without hurting himself, or if he's close to me while I emit the aura, Ponk explained. We're trying to break it with positive reinforcement. Rewards when he doesn't scratch for a full day, but it doesn't seem to be working. Is he okay though? Punz asked. Ponk nodded. Yeah, he's doing much better. It's hard to work through 13 years of trauma, and he hasn't even been out for a full year. He's not going through withdrawal, but he still flinches and the scratching, but he's doing much better, Ponk told him. That's good, Punz sighed in relief. Are you going to tell him? Ponk asked. Punz didn't look at him. I don't know. I think he deserves to know, Punz. All he knows is Dream. You should tell him that his family wanted him and that you still care. There was a reason you took him out of Dream's grasp, Ponk said. It's my fault he was in there in the first place. I practically gave him to Dream. That's not what happened. You were a child, and you didn't know. Your parents are responsible as well, and even then, you were lied to. It's not your fault, and I'm sure he'll understand, Ponk said. How do you even begin to tell someone this? Punz asked. Ponk paused for a moment. I can be there, if you want, he told him. I think we'd both prefer if you were, Punz replied. Ponk sighed. Look, I think at some level he remembers you, subconsciously probably, but he does have some sort of memory of you. Ponk crossed his arms, leaning on the doorway. What do you mean? Punz asked. He doesn't have it with him, but I gave him a little plush, a purple hippo, I think. He named it Luke, Ponk told him. Punz blinched at him. How did you? You're a mouthy drunk, Ponk replied. I was the only one around. Punz let the tension release from his posture. Frick, he breathed. For the first month he clung to the thing like it was his lifeline, Ponk explained. He named it after you, whether he knows it or not. He's going to hate the name soon enough, Punz sighed. Whatever, as long as you tell him I don't care how stupid you're being, Ponk told him. Punz sighed again. Okay, he agreed. Ponk looked at him for a moment before he nodded. Let's go then, Ponk told him. Punz sighed but nodded, and Ponk led them into the house. Purple was sitting in the kitchen table. It was a very homey place, like a little farmhouse for some cliche show, although it did seem like the perfect place to hide Purple from Dream, or the government for that matter. Perp, our guest is here. You remember him? Ponk asked, walking into the room. Punz in tow. Purple looked up now, what seemed to be a workbook. He stiffened when he saw Punz, and Punz almost walked out there, mentally thinking they'd sleep in the car and then drive the two later and not face Purple. Instead, Ponk had a grip on their shoulder and steered Punz into the seat across from Purple. Yeah, he muttered, the tense lessening, but it was still there. He was obviously not comfortable with him, but he still wasn't exactly adverse to him. It was progress, he guessed. Purple ducked his head down and scribbled a couple of numbers in the margins of his workbook thing and shoved it in front of Ponk. Punz raised an eyebrow, but it was more to himself than anything. Ponk looked at the paper for a moment before looking back at Purple. Then just tell him, Ponk said. Purple flushed slightly and punched Ponk's arm. Kinda hard, but Ponk only laughed. Punz sat there, feeling awkward and guilty as they noticed how the two acted together. very obviously comfortable with each other, and Punz felt himself wanting that. Their brother was having bonded moments with someone who Punz considered basically a stranger. They really had no right to be like this, but they couldn't help their feelings. Purple cut himself and looked away. Thank you for getting me out of there. Punz could only blink. He hadn't expected to be thanked for being a decent human being. Calling a mercenary a decent human being was stretching it a little bit too. Although I would have preferred both of us, Purple muttered afterwards. But it was quiet, and Punz knew he wasn't meant to hear it. Punk rolled his eyes regardless and gave Punz a quick kick under the table. I mean, you shouldn't be thanking me for that. You shouldn't have to have been in there in the first place, but there's sort of a reason that I chose you over your friend, Punz said. Definitely feeling nervous. It was almost debilitating. Their heartbeat was so loud that they hadn't known any better. They'd say Punk and Purple could hear it. Tommy, Purple said, correcting Punz of friend to Tommy. Punz remembered the conversation with Wilbur. We found Tommy. The kid had a name just like Purple, and Punz figured he should use it. Right, Tommy, Punz corrected, and Purple nodded. Why? Purple asked, picking at his bandages subconsciously. It wasn't until Punz felt the calming aura that was Punk's power that Punz felt like he could do it. Of course, Punz knew that it was more of Purple's benefit to get him to stop with the bandages, but Punz appreciated it anyway. I'm your biological brother, Punz admitted. Purple paused and blinked a few times before straightening. What? He asked. I had been looking for you ever since I was capable of it, and allied with him in hopes I could get a lead, but when he showed me you guys, I didn't know what to do. I stacked up favors, and I was able to get you out, but I couldn't help you after that. I don't have a stable lifestyle, and I have very little skills when it comes to making money. I'm very sorry, Punz rambled. Purple looked conflicted and confused. But I was in a containment center before Dream, Purple said. Punz sighed and closed his eyes, letting his head hit the table. We didn't know it was a containment center, Punz told him. We were told it was a school. You were the first S level in centuries, and we had no clue how to help you or prevent you from hurting yourself or others, and the center approached us. We were told we could see you whenever we wanted, but by the time we found out what it was, you were gone. We? Purple asked. Our parents, Punz answered, looking at him. What? Where are they? They died a little while back. They never stopped looking for you, Punz told him. Purple bit his lip, chewing at the dry skin there. I'm so sorry, I couldn't save you. It's all my fault. Your fault? Purple asked, looking at them. I was the deciding vote when it came to this school, and I was frickin' 11, and you were 2. I'm sorry, I didn't know. And I'm so sorry. Punz could feel the tears welling up in his eyes, and he refused to actually cry. He couldn't do that now. You were a kid, Purple had said after a long silence. He was fiddling with the pencil and had sensibly leaned back in his chair. What happened when I was the prophet wasn't mine. This isn't yours. Drop it, Purple muttered. Punz held his hands up in surrender pose. Punk crossed his arms. So you're my brother. Punz nodded. Yeah. Are you going to stay or are you going to run off again? Purple asked, not looking at Punz but focusing on his pencil, turning it around in his hand. Do you want me to stay? Punz asked, not expecting him to want to know Punz more. Purple shrugged. I like to be able to decide for myself whether I like you or not. I'm kind of sick of people deciding stuff for me, he told them. You're 16, Punk hummed. Purple glared at him with no heat. You know what I mean. Punk smiled at him. I thought no one was out there for me, so it's nice to find out someone was there looking for me. We never stopped, Punz told him. Followed every lead even when we knew they were fake, just in case. Why now? Purple asked suddenly. What? Why come now? It hasn't been a year or anything. Why now? Purple asked. Punz opened his mouth but then turned to Punk and frowned. Had Punk not told Purple about SBI yet? Okay, this is on me. I haven't told you yet, but there was some very important and I think good news, Punk interrupted. Purple only raised an eyebrow at him. Punk laughed nervously at that. I was recently contacted by a company a very good friend of mine works at, regarding you because they're working on officially taking down Dream. Purple blinked and his eyes brightened for a moment before going dark again. How did they know about me? Us, Purple asked. Well, because they happened to find Tommy, Punk admitted. Purple paused for a moment before launching himself from his seat, hands leaning on the table as he was practically in Punk's face. Tommy got out? He asked. Punk was pressed against the seat, clearly not expecting this. He laughed nervously again. Apparently, Punk answered. I need to go. We have to go see him. Like now, Purple yelled, running from the kitchen to the mudroom, grabbing his coat and attempting to shove shoes on. Punk wasn't sure what to do when suddenly an overwhelming calm feeling made its way over him. Punk had definitely dialed up his power level, calming down the entire house to a major extent. Purple groaned but definitely sunk into the floor. He had stopped putting on his shoes and let the jacket fall from his shoulders. We can go see him, but we were planning on leaving tomorrow. Puns and I are probably going to help with the takedown while you chill with Tommy and the other S-levels. Punk sighed, helping Purple up and back to the kitchen table. Other? Purple asked. The other two. There's 4 of you. You were the oldest and Tommy was the youngest, Puns told him. And Tommy was with them? Purple asked. Punk nodded. Yeah, it seems he was looking for you when they found him. He ended up opening up to them and they were able to track you down to here. They have a plan and Puns and I are going to assist with it. You don't have to do anything, but we figured you'd want to reunite with Tommy, Punk told him. Yes. Why? We can't go now. Why can't we go now? Purple asked. No. Punk told him. Purple slumped down in his seat. But I think we could call him. Purple's eyes practically had stars in them. Wilbur was content to watch the 3 kids try to figure out what the rules were to a game that Wilbur had never heard of. Techno had bet the 3 of them that they had made it up themselves, but Phil swore he had heard about it at least once before, although he couldn't figure out either. All 3 of them sat there behind the coffee table, sitting at the floor, as Phil, Wilbur, and Techno sat on the couch trying to figure out if the game really was made up or real. Wilbur was caught in the middle. I'm telling you, mate, Phil was cut off by Wilbur's phone ringing. He glared with no heat. Saved by the bell. Wilbur huffed and checked the caller ID and sobered up immediately. He jumped up and brisk walked into the kitchen, leaving Techno and Phil concerned behind him, though they didn't follow him. Hello? Wilbur answered. Hey, so I've got Purple to agree to meet, and we'll be heading over there with Puns tomorrow. But he's really eager to see Tommy again. Any chance they could talk over the phone? Punk asked. Wilbur blinked. Yeah, I'm sure he'll be fine with that. I don't think he knows what Purple is found alive. He'll be surprised, but I'm sure he'll be happy. You'll give him the phone? A distant voice asked. Wilbur could only assume it was Purple. Yeah, hold on a second, Wilbur said as he walked back to the group who had sensed the tension in the room. Rombo and Tubbo were sitting on the chairs opposite of each other, while Tommy continued to sit on the floor, writing something down while leaning on the coffee table. Wilbur put the phone on speaker and placed the phone down in front of Tommy on the coffee table, gaining him a confused look. You're on speaker, Wilbur told him and went back to his seat on the couch. There was a silence in the room. Although it was only for a moment, it was suffocating and killing pretty much everyone. Only Wilbur knew what this was, and even then, Wilbur was hoping this wasn't some cruel prank. Tommy? A kid asked from the other line, and Tommy promptly dropped his pencil, staring at the phone. He let out a breath that sounded like he was trying to say an actual word, but nothing came out at first. Purpled? Tommy asked, in a similar tone. The majority of the room gaped and looked at Wilbur, whose eyes were trained on Tommy. Yeah, Purple replied. You're alive, Tommy whispered. Me? You're alive, Purple replied. Tommy laughed aloud. It was more like a hysterical outburst of emotions, but in all it was a laugh. Yeah, I had nothing preventing me from enacting our plan after you left. Took a couple of months, but yeah, I'm out, Tommy told him. I'm glad, Purple replied. We're taking him down, Tommy said. Do you want to come here? How is it there? Purple asked, a familiar tone entering his voice. Better than that trash hole you must be in, Tommy answered back easily, a small smile making its way onto his face. There was a hey in the background and a snorting noise from Purple. Oh yeah, Purple replied. Yeah, I'll owe you a favor if you come here, Tommy told him. Technically you already owe me one, Purple commented through the phone. Tommy knew he was already on board, but this type of banter was just common for the two of them. Tommy missed this, and he knew Purple did too. What? Tommy asked, honestly not knowing what he owed Purple from. I saved your life, Purple answered. Tommy paused, then realized what he meant. No, you barely saved it. I would have been fine, and you didn't need to do that, Tommy replied, obviously lying on what had happened. You literally coded. Purple deadpanned. I changed the odds so your heart would continue to beat. Oh, Wow, look at that. What an unfortunate time to be on speakerphone. How do you turn this thing off? Coded, Purple yelled. Oh, whoops, there we go, off speaker, haha, Tommy laughed awkwardly. So, you okay? Yeah, I actually am. I've been getting better. You? Purple asked. Yeah, better than I have been. I haven't been out all that long, so I hope you're doing a little better than I am, Tommy laughed slightly. I've actually actively had therapy, and I doubt you have, so yeah, probably, Purple Tuft. Good, you definitely need it. You do too, Purple said. Tommy made an uncommitted noise. What do you do now? Be a kid? Purple said. As much as I can be with everything. I like math now. You've always liked math when we were there, Tommy commented. Yeah, but it grounds me apparently. Helps me just exist when my brain decides not to, Purple answered. Tommy snorted. You were always out of it, Tommy muttered. That was the drugs, Purple answered, a little too casually for what he was saying. Tommy snorted slightly. Still, you were pretty fricked up in the head, Tommy told him. Not like you weren't either, Purple replied. Never said I wasn't. Okay, we should probably shift from this topic, someone said in the back. Ponk. Puns looks like he's about to be sick anyway. Tommy snorted at the thought of the stoic man he saw in the compound looking ill at this. Tommy, could you put us back on the speakerphone? Sure. Tommy pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at the phone for a moment before pressing the right button. Arrangements were made then. Times were set and meetings were scheduled and things were falling into place. Tommy was excited for one of the first times since they'd met him. He wanted to show Purple the building and have him actually meet Tubbo and Ranbu. He was sure they would get along. Dry humor and personality would match well with the other two of them. He was sure of it. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. Purple still had to figure out if he would ever or even could help with their mission. Not to mention they hadn't even enacted the plan, nor did they have a perfect one. They still need at least one of Dream's friends. Even though they had Puns, Dream probably knew better than to trust him again. Not after Puns took Purple and they both disappeared from him. Still, despite knowing it was the calm before the storm, they enjoyed the fact that there was calm. The storm wasn't there yet, and there was no need to rush it. Sapnap groaned and shifted from his seat to the very uncomfortable hotel couch. Why do we have to be in the city? He asked. George raised an eyebrow at him. Dream is looking for something, George said. Besides, I thought you'd be happy being here, seeing your fiancés and all. Yeah, well, I can't see them until Dream gets back. Frickin' a-hole said I have to stay here until he's done, Sapnap hissed. George only shrugged. We're only here for a couple of days. Just enjoy your time or something, George huffed. If he doesn't get back here soon, I'm ditching him and staying with Quackity and Carl. Sapnap crossed his arms, slumping down in his seat. Good plan, George mocked and went back to his phone. Sapnap made a face and hoped Dream would come back with his scouting soon. Whatever the hell he was looking for, it had to be good or else the two of them would kill him, or each other. And I know it's only been 30 minutes of stream, but the next chapters are pretty long, and I don't think I'm going to be able to handle reading both of them. So that's where we're going to end it for today. I know these last two streams have been pretty short and not too much has happened, but I hope you guys have enjoyed them. And we'll be playing Minecraft hopefully for longer than 45 or 35 minutes next time. And then after that, Stardew Valley. And then if you have any recommendations for any games you think we would enjoy or you recommend, you can leave them in the Discord server or in the comments. And I would really appreciate it. I'm looking for a couple on my own, but I'm having a hard time deciding on what ones are worth putting effort into. Oh, my voice. My poor voice. I don't know if you can tell, but it's already scratchy. And sorry for all the stuttering at certain points. It wasn't as bad as that one time I was stuttering so much, but it was, to me at least, it felt like a problem. But thank you guys for joining me for stream today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day and a good Wednesday tomorrow, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye. Love you guys. Bye.